When a man tests you after no contact, it's important to understand that his actions are not random. It's part of a deeper psychological mechanism that reveals a lot about his emotional state and, more importantly, his intentions. This is a classic test to gauge where you stand emotionally. During the period of no contact, there's space and time for emotions to settle, but there's also a chance for doubts to creep. You see, when there's silence, things aren't always as clear as they seem. He might wonder if you've moved on, if you still care, or if you're truly over him. This period of no contact often forces both people to reflect, but from his perspective, the lack of communication might stir up fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being irrelevant in your life, and ultimately the fear of losing the connection you once shared. Testing after no contact is a way for him to check the waters, to see if you've truly moved on or if there's a chance for reconciliation. It's not always about testing the relationship, but more about testing his place in your life. It's a question of value, of understanding if he still matters to you the way he once did. For some, the test comes in the form of small gestures, sending a message, calling out of the blue, or even liking your posts on social media. For others, it's more direct, a conversation that picks up where you left off as if nothing ever changed. The purpose of this test is to see if there's still an emotional reaction. Does his message make you smile, or does it trigger feelings of discomfort or frustration? Your response, or lack of response, will give him insight into whether you're emotionally available or distant. But let's not forget, this is a test that often goes both ways. Just as he might be testing you, you're also testing him. How does he handle the silence? Does he respect your space, or does he push you to respond when you're not ready? The way he approaches the test shows a lot about his intentions for the future. Is he hoping for a clean slate? Or does he still need validation and reassurance that he holds a place in your life? Understanding the psychology behind this test is key. It's not just about being pushed into making a decision or reacting in a certain way. It's about recognizing that he's using this moment to gather clarity about the relationship and his role within it. But remember, the way you handle this test can set the tone for what happens next. The beauty of this moment is in the clarity it can bring. It helps both of you understand what you truly want, and it offers an opportunity for you to show emotional strength and self-awareness. If you handle it with grace and confidence, it'll give him the message that you are not easily swayed, that you're grounded in who you are, and that you're ready to move forward in a way that serves your growth and well-being. In the end, it's about making decisions that reflect your true feelings, not just reacting to an external test. And whether or not this test brings the two of you closer or pushes you further apart, it will ultimately reveal more about what you both need from each other, and whether or not you're both on the same path moving forward. When a man tests you after no contact, it's important to understand that he's not only testing your emotions, but also testing the boundaries of your strength and independence. During the period of no contact, you've likely done a lot of personal reflection, growth, and healing, and he knows that. But what he doesn't know is how much you've grown or how much you've evolved as a person. This test is his way of determining if you're still emotionally available and if you're still willing to accept the dynamics you once had. The silence between the two of you gives him a chance to recalibrate his feelings, but it also creates a space where doubt and uncertainty can thrive. He may not be entirely sure whether you're still emotionally connected to him, and so testing you after no contact is a way for him to gauge whether he still has a place in your heart, or if you've truly moved on. It's often not about him wanting to rekindle the relationship at all costs, but about seeing if you're still the same person he left behind. He's searching for clues to understand if you're still vulnerable or if you've built emotional walls to protect yourself. This kind of test is also about observing how you respond to his actions. If you respond quickly, eagerly, and with excitement, it may give him the impression that you haven't changed much and that you're still attached to him in the same way you were before. However, if you respond with caution, distance, or even indifference, he will quickly realize that you're no longer the person who would drop everything for him. You've learned to protect your emotions and set boundaries, which is something that may shock him because it's not something he expects. It's also a reflection of the emotional space you've created for yourself during the time of no contact. He's testing whether or not you've learned to stand firm on your own without him as a source of validation or emotional support. In many ways, his test is an attempt to see if you're still emotionally dependent on him or if you've grown stronger in your sense of self. He may have left the relationship expecting you to struggle or fall apart without him, but if you show emotional strength and independence, it can be a major shock to him. The key to understanding this test is realizing that it's not necessarily about him wanting to re-enter your life. It's about him wanting to know where he stands in your heart and in your mind. He wants to know if he's still a priority or if he's just a passing thought. This is his way of measuring his value in your life after the time apart. How you respond will speak volumes about the person you've become. The more you've grown during the no contact period, the less likely you are to fall into old patterns or let his test dictate your emotions. If you approach this test with a sense of confidence, emotional maturity, and clarity, you show him that you're no longer the same person who would let him in without question. You're someone who knows their worth, who understands the importance of setting boundaries, and who is no longer willing to tolerate behavior that doesn't align with your growth. This is the turning point. This moment will either highlight the progress you've made or show where you still need to grow. The decision you make in this moment will impact how the dynamic unfolds in the future. And while he might be testing you, in the end, it's really a test of your own emotional resilience, self-worth, and the way you handle this test will set the stage for the future, not just with him, but with yourself and anyone else who enters your life moving forward. When he tests you after no contact, there's a deeper reason behind it than just checking in on how you're doing emotionally. It's his way of confirming if you still hold space for him in your life. In many cases, he may have left or distanced himself with the assumption that you would eventually chase after him. He expects you to crumble, to feel lonely, and to be desperate for his attention once the silence sets in. But the test after no contact reveals more about his own insecurities and fears than it does about your emotions. He's questioning whether or not you'll return to the same level of vulnerability you had before, the same level of emotional dependency that may have existed in the past. The key here is that he's unsure what role he still plays in your life. If you've truly grown during the no contact period, he'll feel that shift. The way you respond to him after this period of silence can reveal if you've gained a sense of self-respect, independence, and emotional clarity. And let's face it, these qualities can be intimidating to someone who is used to having that kind of influence over your emotions. The challenge for him is accepting that you might no longer need him in the way you once did. You see, when there's a pattern of emotional reliance, the fear of rejection is often a driving force for both partners. He may fear that you've found someone else, or worse, that you've learned to live without him. This test is his way of bringing himself back into the picture, trying to confirm that you're still emotionally invested, that you still need him in your life. But if you've truly shifted and grown, his test will not have the same effect on you as it once did, because you're perfected at it. It won't have the power to manipulate or influence you the way it did before. And that, my friends, is the point of no return. For him, it may not be a test of how much he loves you or wants you back. It's more about whether or not he still has control over your heart. In the past, he may have been used to being the focal point of your emotional world. But now you have the ability to stand on your own, to think critically, and to evaluate what is truly best for you, whether or not he is a part of that equation. What's important to recognize is that this test isn't always about him wanting to come back into your life permanently. It's about his need for validation, his desire to know that at any given moment, you're still emotionally available to him. And when you've grown beyond that, when you've learned to protect your peace, your heart, and your energy, you no longer play into his need. For this is the moment where you get to decide, not just for the present, but for the future. You get to determine if you're going to re-enter the cycle that you've worked so hard to break, or if you're going to continue on the path of emotional freedom and self-growth. So when he tests you after no contact, what you're really being tested on is not just your emotional strength, but your ability to stand in your own power. The way you handle this test is going to determine how your future interactions with him or anyone unfold. It's a true reflection of where you are in your journey of healing, self-discovery, and emotional independence. The moment you realize that you don't need his validation to feel whole, that's when you've passed the test, and that's when you're truly free. When he tests you after no contact, it's often not just a test of your emotional state or whether you're still thinking about him. It's his way of gauging whether you've moved forward, whether you've learned the lessons from the relationship, and if you've truly changed. In these moments, what's being tested is your growth, your ability to be different from who you were before the silence. Think about it. When someone tests you after a period of no contact, it's because they want to see if you still react in the same way, if you still fall into old patterns. They want to know if you've remained stuck or if you've broken free from that emotional cycle. This kind of test is often a power play. It's not necessarily an intentional or malicious attempt to hurt you, but rather an unconscious need for reassurance. He might be testing you to see if you're still emotionally dependent, still seeking approval, still longing for something from him. The reality is a person who is emotionally available and secure doesn't need to test another person. They simply show up, they are honest and transparent, and they respect boundaries. When a man tests you after no contact, it's a reflection of his own inner conflict. It could be that he's unsure of his own feelings, unsure whether he still has a place in your life, or unsure if he can emotionally manipulate you once again. What's important here is that this test is an opportunity for you to demonstrate how far you've come. The way you respond will reflect whether you're still attached to the outcome, whether you're still operating from a place of emotional scarcity, or whether you've stepped into your personal power. You don't have to respond in the way he expects, and you don't. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do is simply stay true to yourself, maintain your boundaries, and show that you've moved on in a healthy way. Remember, these tests are not about you failing or passing them. They're about him seeing if you're still the same person he knew before. If he sees that you've evolved, that you no longer need to seek closure, or that you've shifted your mindset to a healthier one, this will often surprise him. He might not know how to react because he's used to seeing you chase after him or give him a piece of your emotional energy every time he calls. But he'll perpetuate. But now your actions, or lack of them, are creating a gap that he wasn't prepared for. It's also important to realize that his test could be an invitation for him to see if he still has power in your life. If you were in a toxic or one-sided relationship, there's a possibility that he's testing whether you've learned to respect your own boundaries. In these situations, the test is not a reflection of your value, but a sign that he hasn't fully understood or acknowledged the lessons of the no contact period. His actions show that he hasn't yet come to terms with the fact that your worth and emotional well-being don't depend on him. Ultimately, how you handle the test is a reflection of the boundaries you've set for yourself. This is your moment to demonstrate your growth. When he tests you, you are in control of how you respond. And that's the key. If you choose to remain emotionally independent, if you choose not to chase after him or allow him to manipulate your feelings, you're taking the higher road. This is where real growth happens. You're showing yourself and him that you've moved on. And in that moment, you realize that you don't need anyone's validation to feel whole. You've passed the test, not just in his eyes, but in your own. When a man makes the move after no contact, it's often a sign of his own emotional struggle. He might have spent the time apart reflecting on the relationship, questioning his feelings, or dealing with his own personal growth. However, what you need to understand is that his move isn't always about wanting to reconnect in a healthy or genuine way. Sometimes it's more about testing whether he still holds a place in your heart. When, after no contact, he may feel uncertain about whether you've moved on or whether there's still a part of you that holds on to the past. This move can be an unconscious way of seeking validation, an attempt to confirm that you still care or that he can still have an influence on your emotional state. The key here is to realize that his move is often motivated by his insecurities or an underlying desire to regain control. If the relationship ended because of his actions or because you made the difficult decision to distance yourself, his reappearance may signal that he's testing your emotional availability, or that it's not always about genuine interest in building something solid. It can be a way of reassuring himself of his power and influence over you. At this point, the ball is entirely in your court. His move after no contact shouldn't be taken as an automatic invitation to pick up where you left off. It's crucial that you stay grounded in the progress you've made during the time apart. You've likely learned valuable lessons about self-respect, emotional independence, and what you truly need in a relationship. So, when he reaches out, the most important thing is to remember that this moment isn't a test of whether you still love him, but a test of how far you've come in reclaiming your personal power. When he makes that move, there's a strong chance that he is still expecting you to be the same person you were before the separation. Someone who would instantly respond to his needs, someone who might still be emotionally available to him. This is why it's so important for you to demonstrate that you've evolved. You can choose to respond with maturity, with an understanding that your life is no longer revolving around him or your past together. You've set new boundaries, and you're no longer allowing past patterns to control your decisions. It's easy to fall into the trap of being overly responsive when he reaches out. It's tempting to allow old emotions to surface and rush into a conversation or interaction as if nothing ever happened. But remember, that would be going backwards. Instead, take a moment to pause, reflect, and ask yourself if engaging with him is in alignment with your values and your growth. Does reconnecting serve you, or does it take you back to a place where you feel less than your best? If you choose to engage, you don't need to respond in a way that reopens old wounds or invites unnecessary emotional chaos. You can be civil, kind, and emotionally detached, showing that you've learned the power of maintaining your peace. It's about creating a boundary that shows him you've changed. And if he doesn't respect that boundary, then it becomes even clearer that his move wasn't about genuine reconciliation, but rather an attempt to regain something he lost. Understand that his reaching out is not a reflection of your worth or whether you should drop everything and welcome him back into your life. It's a reflection of his uncertainty, his emotional need, and his attempt to regain the power dynamic that he might have once had in the relationship. But your response, or your lack of it, is your opportunity to stand firm in your personal growth, emotional independence, and as hard as it might be to resist the urge to engage, your silence or your measured response is the most powerful move you can make. It shows that you are no longer seeking validation from him or anyone else. You're affirming that your happiness is no longer tied to someone else's actions. His move is, in essence, a test to see if you're still stuck in the past, still holding on to a relationship that no longer serves you. But you don't have to take the bait. You've worked too hard to let someone's emotional uncertainty disrupt your progress. In the end, when you recognize that his move is about his own need for reassurance and not an invitation to step back into a toxic dynamic, you'll realize that the best response is the one that maintains your emotional stability and reinforces your personal growth. Keep your focus on your journey, on what makes you happy, and on what truly nurtures your sense of self-worth. Because after no contact, the move you make next is one that reflects who you are now, not who you were before. When he reaches out after no contact, it's important to understand that he may be trying to test the waters, trying to gauge your reaction to see if you're still emotionally attached to him. This isn't always about reconciliation or deep emotional connection. It could simply be a reflection of his own curiosity or a way to confirm whether he still has a place in your life. He may even feel uncertain about where he stands, perhaps unsure if you've moved on or if you still hold any feelings for him. This is his way of figuring out if he still has access to you emotionally, and how far you've come since the separation. His behavior might come across as unexpected or confusing, and that's because he's likely grappling with his own inner conflict. He may have realized after no contact that he misses the connection, or he may be dealing with loneliness. He could also be trying to find closure or resolve any lingering feelings that he has in process. But the key here is to recognize that his re-engagement is not necessarily about wanting to get back together or move forward in a healthy way. It's about his need for clarity and emotional security. This is the moment where your response will matter the most. The way you choose to react will either reinforce old patterns or show him how much you've grown. It's not about proving anything to him. It's about asserting your own boundaries and emotional independence. If you find yourself reacting out of old habits, out of a desire for comfort or familiarity, you might slip back into the same emotional cycle that led to the separation in the first place. However, if you can pause and truly assess the situation, you can choose to act from a place of strength and self-respect. It's crucial to resist the temptation to respond immediately or to engage without clarity. The urge to respond can come from a place of wanting to be understood or to reopen a connection. But this is a time to reflect on whether you're emotionally ready to handle the situation with the maturity and distance it requires. It's easy to get caught up in old emotions and rush into a response, especially if his message stirs up feelings of longing or But remember that these feelings are normal. However, acting on them without considering your personal growth and emotional well-being can derail the progress you've made. Instead, take a moment to evaluate what his message represents. Is it a genuine attempt at rebuilding trust or simply a test to see if you'll fall back into old habits? Does he truly want to understand your emotional journey, or is he seeking comfort, validation, or control? Recognizing his motivations will help you craft a response or decide if silence is the best course of action. Silence can be a powerful tool. Doesn't mean you're ignoring him. It means that you are choosing to protect your peace and emotional well-being by not rushing to engage in a dynamic that may not serve you. His reaching out is a reflection of his uncertainty. He might be wondering if the emotional connection he once had with you still exists. He might be seeking reassurance that he still holds a significant place in your life. However, this moment isn't about you re-entering a space where you feel obligated to meet his emotional needs. This is about understanding that you no longer need to define your worth or emotional stability by his actions. His test is only a reflection of his own doubts and insecurities. What matters now is how you hold yourself in the face of his uncertainties. Remember that his reaching out isn't an invitation to revisit the past or to let him back into your life on his terms. It's an opportunity for you to reaffirm your emotional boundaries, to demonstrate that you are in control of your own feelings and that your life is no longer centered around his approval or presence. It's not about him getting the validation he may be looking for. It's about you staying true to your own emotional journey and recognizing that you have moved beyond a place where you need external validation. Your response, or lack thereof, sets the tone for how you engage with him moving forward. You've come too far in your personal growth to allow his emotional needs to dictate your actions. So if you feel that responding is the right choice, make sure it comes from a place of clarity and strength. But if you choose to remain silent or give a measured response, understand that this too is a powerful form of self-respect. You've done the work, and your emotional peace should always come first. His test, in the end, is not about passing or failing. It's about showing you that you have control over how you choose to engage and what you allow into your life moving forward. When he tests you after no contact, it's not always about what he's saying or doing. It's about observing how you respond. He may subtly push boundaries or bring up shared memories to see if you'll react emotionally or if you'll let the past dictate your present behavior. This test isn't necessarily malicious. It's a way for him to gauge where you stand, whether you're still tied to the dynamics that define your previous relationship, or whether you've truly moved on. In a sense, his actions are less about you and more about his need for clarity, perhaps even reassurance about where things stand. What he's doing in these moments is seeking control, not always in a negative sense, but in a way that allows him to understand if he still holds sway over your emotions. He might phrase his questions or comments in a way that tries to pull you back into old patterns, those places of vulnerability you've worked so hard to leave behind. This is his way of assessing whether you're still the person he left or if you've grown beyond the version of you he once knew. It's a subtle challenge, and the way you respond speaks volumes. You have to recognize that his test is not just about him trying to understand you, it's about you understanding yourself. Are you able to remain calm and composed, even if his words are designed to provoke an emotional reaction? Can you step back and see the situation for what it is? An opportunity to reaffirm your emotional independence and show that you're no longer defined by his approval or presence. This is where your growth will shine, not in proving anything to him, but in standing firm in the person you've become. Your silence, your boundaries, and your refusal to be pulled into a reactive state are the most powerful responses you can offer. It's not about ignoring him or playing games. It's about showing that you've moved beyond the need to engage on his terms. If you do respond, let it come from a place of strength and emotional clarity where your words reflect who you are now, not who you were when the connection was broken. It's how you maintain your progress, by staying grounded and true to your journey. By testing you, he's ultimately revealing more about himself than about you. His actions reflect his uncertainties, his need for validation, and perhaps even his recognition of the changes in you. But this isn't about his realization, it's about you standing in your truth. You've done the work, you've reclaimed your peace, and you no longer need to prove anything to him or anyone else. The real test isn't his, it's yours. And you've already passed it by choosing to honor your growth above all else. When he finally realizes you're no longer waiting for him, it creates a shift he wasn't prepared for. This moment of recognition is not about regret alone. It's about him facing the reality that you've moved beyond his grasp. He thought he had all the time in the world, that you'd be there, waiting, holding space for him. But your growth has changed everything. You're no longer the person who revolves around his choices or waits for his next move. This shift catches him off guard because he underestimated your strength and resolve. It's not that he expected you to remain stagnant, it's that he didn't anticipate how your absence would create a void he could no longer fill. When you stop chasing, when you stop being available, it forces him to confront the parts of himself that he's avoided. Your distance becomes a mirror, showing him what he lost when you chose to prioritize yourself. And he becomes desperate when he calls the weather, when he chose to prioritize yourself. The beauty of this transformation is that it's not about him at all. It's about you stepping into your power, reclaiming your narrative, and deciding that your worth is not tied to anyone's acknowledgement. His reaction is just the byproduct of your growth, a sign that your decision to let go was the right one. You're no longer operating from a place of need or longing. Instead, you're rooted in self-assurance, confident in the path you've chosen. And here's the important thing: his realization doesn't change your journey. It might serve as validation, but you've already made peace with moving forward. Whether he chooses to act on this shift or not is no longer your concern. You're focused on what lies ahead, and that's where your power truly resides. When he notices the strength in your silence, it creates a tension he can't ignore. Silence has a power that words often cannot match. It speaks of confidence, resilience, and a refusal to engage in the same cycles that once held you captive. By choosing not to explain yourself, not to chase for answers or closure, you send a clear message that you stepped out of his frame of control. This silence disrupts his expectations. He thought he knew how you'd respond, anticipated that you'd come back looking for clarity, or that you'd hold on to the need to make things right. But by staying quiet, you show him that you've outgrown the need for his validation. It forces him to sit with his own thoughts, his own actions, and the consequences of both. Silence is not about manipulation. It's about protecting your peace. It's about giving yourself space to heal, to grow, and to focus on what truly matters. When you stop pouring energy into someone who didn't value it, you redirect that energy into yourself, and that shift radiates power. It shows that you no longer require anyone to fill a void because you've learned to fill it on your own. And that quiet strength, it becomes undeniable. While he may wrestle with what your silence means, you've already moved forward. Your choice not to engage isn't just unexpected, it's transformative. When he sees you thriving, living your life with passion and purpose, it challenges everything he believed about your connection. Thriving isn't just about external success, it's about inner peace, about finding joy and fulfillment in places he might have underestimated or overlooked. It's about proving to yourself, not to him, that you're capable of moving forward and creating a life that feels whole even without his presence. Your glow, your growth, it becomes unmissable. Whether he witnesses it firsthand or through whispers from mutual friends or social media, your transformation speaks louder than any words ever could. It shows that you've taken the time to rebuild, not just recover. You've embraced the lessons, turned pain into progress, and focused on becoming the best version of yourself. This thriving energy, it draws people in, even him. He may find himself questioning why he let you go or doubting the choices he made. But by the time he realizes what he lost, you're no longer in the same place. You've outgrown the version of yourself that was willing to wait or chase after what wasn't reciprocated. Living fully with joy and confidence isn't about proving a point to him. Is it about proving to yourself that your happiness was never dependent on his validation? Thriving isn't revenge, it's freedom. It's your way of saying, I'm more than what happened to me. I'm what I've chosen to become.